Hello out there, the Grandmistress of Shadow Style JR here, and we're going to be doing something just a teeny bit different here for a bit. See, recently there was a video about turning into gods, demigods, liches in a D&D 4e done by the fine folks at the D&D Beyond channel, and I talked about one of my characters in the comments. And some people were interested in hearing a little more about her because she's a character who ended up becoming a demigod and was one of my most favorite characters either. So I decided to, look into a few things, see if I could pull up the old character sheet a little bit. I was able to find it and talk to it a little more. So let's start with the inciting incident here, the specific comments in question. See if I can get to that. Oh, yeah. Alright, so here we are. We have the comment section on that particular video, and as you can see, among other things, there were people who actually wanted to make clerics of my character and wanted to know the domains of it, so I'm going to go into that as well. And then, of course, specifically, Killface Balor here was one who suggested that I posted a video explaining what the character was, and then link it over here, which I'm going to once I get that uploaded. So that is what we're going to be doing here. So let's start by talking about that character herself, where she came from, and what kind of character she was. So I have my I Play 4e character sheet up here for Albireo Rocinante, half-elf warlock, Star Pact to be precise. And as you can see, she made it all the way to level 30, kind of, sort of. Fun thing about playing 4E, a lot of epic stuff on here. As you can see, she got up to a whopping potential AC of 41. Wow. Yeah, it is still playing. Okay. A whopping AC of 41, 44 fortitude, 46 will, very strong-willed girl. 42 reflexes. If there's one thing 4E was good at, it was really, really high-level play. And her name comes from, honestly, a very, very me kind of a place. It was named after a combination of Don Quixote and Rush's Cygnus X1. Albireo is a star in the Cygnus constellation. Rocinante is the ship in Cygnus X1, which is named after Don Quixote's horse. So all that kind of fit into the Don Quixote. Although her alternate name, as she moved on, was, her friends just called her Albie. But as she went later on, she also kind of took on the nickname Dark Star because of her Star Pact, her kind of, her very kind of gruff demeanor. And being a Star Pact, one of my favorite spells that I gave her was Dire Radiance. It was her at-will power, so she could use it every turn if she felt like it. I called it the Gamma Ray Pulse because it did radiant damage, it came down from the heavens, and it did extra damage if they moved closer to me. So, kind of a reliable bit of damage that she could do there. Some other notable spells that I had given her early on. Sign of the Golden Ram, which came with her theme of occultist, which we'll get into more of why I picked that a little bit later. It creates a zone in the area around her, and what that zone does is whenever an enemy moves into the zone or starts to turn there, roll against their will, and if you beat their will, you shove them back 3 squares. One of my favorite uses of this in the Scales of War campaign that we did, which, by the way, there's going to be some spoilers for the Scales of War campaign when I'm going through this, so if you haven't ever played through that campaign, well, it's probably too late to do that, but just know that these are spoilers anyway. There was one instance where we were actually, like, I believe it was in the Shadowfell, and we came up against a fire elemental. Now, of course, fire elementals in lava, not really hurt all that much by it because they're not immune to it, but they do have a very, very high resistance to fire. Well, what I did was, and this was at a point in the campaign where Albie had an item that let her roll roll twice on like athletics and acrobatics checks. So she was jumping around between like little bits of hardened lava, little islands in the lava in the Shadowfell, hopping about between them. And on one of them, she set up her sign of the Golden Ram. And this elemental comes in, enters the zone on the next turn. So she rolls. I think she might have critted the attack on that. The Constitution versus Will on there. And shoves it back 3 squares right into the lava. Well, our GM rolled for the damage for the fire elemental and ended up rolling so much damage for it for falling into the lava that even with resistance, it died. I killed a fire elemental creature by shoving it into lava. That is one of the most amazing things that has ever happened to me. Yeah, but there were other things that I got. Because she's a warlock, Warlock's Curse, which in 4E basically lets you focus on a target, and as long as you're hitting that, you're doing a lot of damage to it. That's one of the ways in 4E that you, even at lower levels, you can get a lot of damage going really quickly. And then once that is hurt or killed by anybody, not just you, you get a bonus to your next attack. And that can stack up. So if you have like multiple people that are cursed, if you have a power where you can curse multiple people, you can get a +3 roll. So that was nice. Or alternatively, you can remove the curses and get the back boon immediately right then, which I used Minor Gift of Foresight quite a bit. But yeah, there were a lot of cool things that I was able to do with this. Otherwise, my favorite power, Walk Through Darkness. I got a lot of good use out of this. Shift 10, not move 10, but shift 10, which means you can go through areas, lines of sights with a shift and not provoke attacks of opportunity. And during that shift, you're phasing an insubstantial, so you can go through stuff. My favorite use of this was, I believe it was in the Epic Tiers portion of it, level 20 and upward, where we were fighting some enemies. I think they were Githzerai, and one of the enemies is in this tower, goes running down the stairs trying to get away. Well, what I did when it came around my turn was I asked the GM, could I use Walk Through Darkness to go through the floor and go down to the next level? And he did some thinking about it, did some figuring on it, and he decided, yes, but it's not 10 squares down to the ground. I would go down 10 squares and then have to drop the rest of the way and possibly take like some fall damage. Well, I rolled my acrobatics check after that, and I stuck the landing. I like took a minimal amount of damage. So what it played out basically was that Albie just like goes to her fellows, yeah, that guy that ran away, Uh, um, let me see if I can do something about that. And she just sinks into the floor, lands perfectly on her feet on the floor below, right in front of the guy, like descending from the heavens like an angel of vengeance. Hello, where are you going? And just cuts off his escape right there. Suffice it to say, once my fellows came running down the stairs, that guy was toast. But this was one of my favorite daily powers that I got. I never did really get a lot of good use out of this, but this came in really handy in occasional boss fights. Star of Death's Omen. 4d10 plus charisma cold damage, and the target is dazed. When you're dazed, you can't do anything. But if you miss with this, that power is not expended, and you get a +2 power bonus. So what you could do is, say, casting at 30th level, it's a +31 versus reflex. Well, say, Albie were to miss it, but she gets a +2 next time. So if she rolls it again, it's a +33 versus reflex. It's much more likely to hit. Daily powers like that in 4E, some of them got pretty OP. Alright. And otherwise, as far as her build with, obviously she trained up kind of her more warlock abilities. Was able to spell cast with dual implements, which is great because later on she got the Seed of Winter artifact, which later turned into a Staff of Winter on there. So she was able to hold a rod in one hand, a staff in the other, cast her spells. But I've gotten a little far away from this for a while. There is actually a reason why I had her Star Pact and why she took the occultist theme. And it ties into the background Apprentice of a Sinister Cabal. Albireo was actually a survivor of a cult. I think I did an audio drama of this at one point that I put up on a SoundCloud account. And what happened was she fell into this cult. But that cult, as kind of like the last step of loyalty, decided that she should have to kill her parents. Well, Albie didn't want to do that. So the leader of the cult did that instead. That very night, Albie's like, no, this is wrong. I can't do this. I'm out. So she just leaves in the night and just keeps running and running and running until she can't run anymore. She collapses, looks up at the night sky and is like, I can't keep running forever. I don't have the energy to do this, but I don't want to die right now. As I am, I can't fight back against these kind of cultists. I need help. And a voice came down from the stars. As the voice of a very mature, wise, and benevolent lady, and said, I will grant you the power to do this. You must dedicate your life to fighting against cults like this. But I will grant you this power if you do this for me. Nabi's like, yeah, sure, whatever. So she becomes a Star Pact warlock on there. The reason why the voice sounded like a lady is actually something I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But as she grew in power, her pact became, and I think my music stopped. Yes, it did. Sorry about that. She took the Paragon path, from levels 11 through 20. She took the path of the Mistress of the Starry Night, which basically just honed her star powers on there. And I actually like this description of it. While some Star-Pact warlocks may become slaves to horrible entities from the far realm, others take a more rational, naturalistic approach. These warlocks call upon the quieter powers of more mundane stars, imbuing them with cosmic magics and affinity for the powers of fate. While less destructive than their raven kin, they are also masters of their own destinies. Which I like for this girl, because she'd already been in a spot where her destiny was not her own, and she ran away from that. She didn't like that. So, Star-Blessed Wanderer lets you keep the Pact Bone if you miss an attack from bending from it. Star-Cross action takes care of an enemy that you cursed. There's that minor gift of foresight that I mentioned earlier. And Fate of the Body, letting you use the Pact Boon to make yourself a little more agile or a little more sturdy. It's a good thing. So that was the path that she went on. But as she grew, she found out something about her patron. Her patron was not some oft-forgotten building from realms far beyond the stars. Her patron was the goddess Selûne. And for those of you who don't know, Selûne is an elven goddess. A goddess in the domains of knowledge and life. And the reason why Selûne picked Albi was, for one thing, because Albi was anti-theistic. She knew the gods existed, she just hated all of them. And she especially hated the kinds of things that people did in those gods' name. So Selûne was like, you know, this girl? This girl right here, Albireo. I think I can do something with her. I think she's got potential for greatness. And I want to help her foster that. So she grants Albi warlock powers. Now this is not unprecedented. There are ways in which you can have gods be patrons to warlocks. Or at least that was my understanding by the fact that no one called me out on this when I decided to reveal this. And I picked this largely for the sake of irony. My girl became a demi-goddess or epic destiny from 21st level on. So she had a spark of divinity in her. She was being groomed to become a lesser goddess of her own under Selûne. So she got fun things like she got to increase her ability scores by 2 each. I think I put those into Constitution and Charisma because that's what warlocks use, especially Star-Pact ones. She could basically not die once at 24th level. And then the fun part, when she got into 30th level, she could use all of her encounter powers and then immediately regain one. So, yeah, let's go back to the powers here. Let's say, let's say she uses Banish to the Void, and it's the last one that she's using. With her Divine Miracle, she could go back into any of her powers and say, what do I need to use for right now? What would help me in this particular instance? What do I need that could possibly help me out here? Oh, Stellar Debris. Stellar Debris. Because then all these people are trying to hide behind stuff to get concealment. I can bring that back, cast that, and anyone whose reflex I beat becomes is basically blinded. So you do something like that with your encounter powers. Of course, then Divine Regeneration, which means basically you're healing up as you're going. Although I don't think I ever got to use this because there was a point that I had to temporarily remove myself from the Scales of War game. I think I missed like one segment of it. So that was the point where the Divine Ascension came in, where she basically just went up into the Astral Sea, called to Saloon. And here's what Saloon had in mind for her. Because of her issues with the gods, Saloon thought that my girl, Albireo Darkstar, would make for a good Justicar among the gods. Make kind of for a good balance keeper among the gods. If any of the gods like developed a cult in their name that harmed them, or if they ever did something to basically screw over every other god, if they overstep their bounds and out over their domain, there's this really angry half-elf who has been ascended to demi-godhood who can step up and say, "You better stop, or I'm going to fry you. I will wreck you if you don't knock this off." So, at that point, Albireo Rocinante became the Lady Darkstar, a demi-goddess underneath Saloon in the domains of knowledge and justice. I believe I best described her back then as the goddess of Star-Pact warlocks, astronomers, and purely unadulterated badasses. Because I kind of hoped that some of my fellows in the group might have become, like, devotees of Lady Darkstar. Especially because of how close she was with one of them. There was an Elven Ranger that I played alongside named Christelle, who was so amazing as a ranger that the joke was you can't spell Christelle without crits, because she just crit like crazy and hit a lot of stuff. In fact, ultimately the party ended up being named the Sisters of Destruction. Yes, even the members of it that were male. Because, you know, the most consistent two throughout the entire thing were Albie and Christelle. So, when Albie ascended up to goddesshood, it wasn't too long before clerics showed up in the name of Lady Darkstar. Now, it should be noted here that it says the deity is Saloon here for Calith Argenta, which was the cleric that I brought in when I came back. But in reality, she was under Lady Darkstar on there. So her holy symbol was the symbol of Lady Darkstar. And I deliberately built her as an immortal killer. You know, I gave her like very powerful words on there, and you know, I gave her abilities that would specifically focus on taking out immortals. So anything like angels, devils, archons, gods, she could do additional damage to because her favorite enemy was immortals. As a result of being, you know, a devotee of the Lady Darkstar, of the Justicar of gods. So, Eventually, I brought her back. We came to the very, very end of the Scales of War campaign. And the very end of it, I brought Albie back, and I played both her and Calith Argenta, goddess and cleric, side by side, against the evil goddess of greed. And it was really fun to do, too, because, you know, it kind of gets this thought of Calith, you know, like praying to her god, and Albie's like, over on the other side of the battle, yeah, give me a sec. There's your power, have fun. So you literally have goddess and saint cleric fighting beside each other in the final battle of there. And I did mention she was a saint. Yeah, that was the epic destiny that I gave to the cleric. In fact, I called her the first Saint Sister of the Order of Lady Darkstar. And among other things, what it did was, at the end of things, she would die in an old age, her body forever incorruptible and young, brought up to live alongside her goddess for eternity. And just as an effective level, she had Sanctified Revival, where she could heal anyone up who almost died. Bonus to Vortex Will, Reflex and Will, resistance to necrotic damage. Bonuses to healing on there, bonuses to diplomacy and intimidate checks, which especially works out well in some of the later points of the Scales of War. So, you know, she was just a really good, devoted girl. And she became, like, the legacy character to Albie. She became the cleric of Lady Darkstar. And moving along that, I haven't been able to accurately recreate them in 5e because I don't have all the items in D&D Beyond. But there was one thing I was able to do at some point, and I created an artifact that it kind of ties into those as well. The Morning Star of the Exalted Sister. The Exalted Sister in this case being Calith Argenta. It's a +3 magic Morning Star. It can cast Secret Flame. It's got a recharge Divine Word on there, which is a really powerful spell. Props to the D&D Beyond Discord for helping me dial in significant checks on that power. And it's designed to be used by people who can use Morning Stars, like clerics on there. But like some artifacts on there, it does require you to complete a quest with it that involves immortals in some kind of way, because the weapon itself has advantage to attack on immortal creatures. So you'd be going out to like take on an angel or take down a devil or a death knight or a lich or something, try and destroy or redeem them. And ultimately, there's only 2 ways that you can get rid of it and then get something very powerful in return. You can either destroy the artifact by going on a quest to kill the Exalted Sister, which is something you'd probably do if you're more of an evil-aligned party. Or you can go into the astral plane, try to find the Exalted Sister, and give her back her own Morning Star. And if you do that, of course, she and her goddess would reward you with something very powerful in return. Maybe not something as powerful as the Morning Star of the Exalted Sister, but something pretty burly. So that's just a little something additional that I did in 5e that you can use for your own games on there. But ultimately, that ends the story of Albireo Rocinante, because, again, I haven't been able to accurately build her in 5e. The closest patrons to the Star Pact in 5e are arguably great old ones, although there's not a lot of like stellar power with that, or possibly celestial because of a lot of the radiant power that goes in that. Personally, if I were to make one that was more of a Star Pact, I'd probably go with celestial. I've looked through that, and that looks a little closer to what I'd have a warlock in the same vein as Albie be. So that's just my recommendation if you kind of want to make a warlock that's a devotee of the Lady Darkstar. If you want to make a cleric that's a devotee of Lady Darkstar. Again, domains, knowledge, or justice. And of course, you might want to talk over to your DM, see kind of what they're going to have idea for like story hooks and whatnot. But if you want extra bonus points for making a cleric of Lady Darkstar, make him someone who's, you know, kind of raging against the heavens a little bit. Maybe make him feel like out of all the gods, the Lady Darkstar is the least dickish of them, you know? Make your character kind of feel like, and obviously you don't have to do this, but this is just kind of something I'm suggesting here. Make them feel like the only god that they align with is the one goddess that hates all the other gods and goddesses. That wants them all to knock their shit off, you know? That wants them all to just help their people and not worry about fighting each other all the time. And of course, obviously, there are limits to what Darkstar can do because, of course, like most gods, she won't be able to enter Sigil, and she can't really do anything about the Blood War because that's doomed to... that has always been and forever shall be. But it's a good domain to have if you want to have a cleric who's just into seeking knowledge, or who is into defending lesser people from, you know, vile, destructive cults. So that's just something to keep in mind if you decide to create a cleric of Lady Darkstar. Just a few suggestions that I can give. Obviously, of course, it's your character. The sky's the limit. And it should be noted, though, that even though it says that the alignment for Albireo is unaligned, which kind of goes into like the neutral territories, like lawful or chaotic or true neutral, in reality, she shifted more towards like chaotic or neutral good. So if you have a cleric, you're probably going to want to stick to one of those two alignments as your alignment. Maybe lawful good. Really depends on how you play lawful good. If you play lawful as concerned as much with true justice as with the law of the land, which, in my opinion, is the best way to play lawful good because it means you're not an idiot for the law, then you can play like a lawful good cleric of her. I would prefer that you stay in the neighborhood of like neutral good or even chaotic good as far as that goes, because, you know, as far as Lady Darkstar goes, she's not really that strict of a goddess. You know, in her own mind, she did a lot of things that instilled fear into the people that she was fighting. I mean, just by its very nature, you look at the keywords of a lot of these warlock powers. One of the most common ones, aside from radiance, is fear. So, you know, that story, like I said, the avenging angel coming down through the tower to cut off the escape. It was designed to instill fear into that, and I still want to say Githzerai, in order to cut off his escape. Make him realize that he had no hope of survival and that his run was futile. And ultimately it was. So, therein lies the tale of the Lady Darkstar. That's how she became a goddess, and that's how she got to have clerics. And if you want to have a cleric, I also gave you a few tips on how you can create a cleric of Lady Darkstar if you feel so inclined, and also a possible artifact up on D&D Beyond. Search for the Morning Star of the Exalted Sister. You can put that in your game, and you can use it however you wish. So, that's really all that needs to be said. So, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope it helps you out. I hope it inspires you. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please do. I've been playing Star Wars: The Old Republic lately. I really love it, because I'm a dork. Until next time, I'm the Grandmistress of Shadow Style. Later, y'all.